Greetings, Hyrenic Media. Today we will have an interesting discussion with Varuzhan Geghamyan, who is an associate professor at Yerevan State University, a specialist in Turkish studies. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Thank you for having me.
The question that's on everyone's mind nowadays is what's Ankara's ambitions for this region and how much have they succeeded with each of the countries, in Georgia, in Azerbaijan, and in Armenia?
Well, to understand Turkey's ambitions in the region which we call currently as South Caucasus, one needs to actually look at the, let's say, privileges of the region. Why is any country should be interested in having at least an influence here or to the maximum to conquer this region? The basic understanding currently, which dominates in media, etc., connects the interest towards South Caucasus with the oil in Azerbaijan. And so energetic resources and the things that are connected with this. But this is only one part of the issue and the importance of the region. Actually, it's the top of the iceberg, as we can say. The real value, the real asset of the region is, of course, its geographic location and the terrain that this territory have. It's a mountainous region, and if any country has a control over this region, it means that it has control over most important critical infrastructure which crosses from north to south, from east to west, so connecting different regions and sub-regions. And there are many communications which are crossing either very close to this region or through this region. So the one who controls the region or has some influence over, it has influence over the whole Eurasian geopolitics and the communication system there. So that's why South Caucasus was always part of geopolitical competitions. It was always a subject of that competition, starting with the times of Persia and Byzantium up to Ottoman Empire and Russian empires. And right now we see, in a way, a great game, as we can call a geopolitical competition between great powers. We see a new type of great game for South Caucasus, and this is not new. So for Turkey, it's, of course, first of all, that it's an ambition to take more possibilities, to get more possibilities, thanks to having influence in South Caucasus, and then go beyond the region. So it's North Caucasus, Central Asia, it's north of Iran, and in general the region which we call Great Middle East. This is the first region, the first reason. The second reason is, of course, connected with the basic approach of any given country of the concerns of security and defense. South Caucasus is a neighboring region for Turkey. It has direct border, and we can also say that one part of South Caucasus is part of currently of the territory of of Republic of Turkey. I mean Kars and sub regions near Kars. So Turkey is a Caucasian country at the same time, and given these facts, Turkey has to deal with northern and with South Caucasian issues because it's just near the border. So you have to deal with that. It's very important. And that's why from the very beginning of foundation of Turkish Republic, as well as in the period of late Ottoman Empire, South Caucasus was always in priority list of Turkey. And currently we see just another attempt of Turkey to have control here, and that's it. So these are the two main reasons why it is important for Turkey, and where its ambitions derive from. So it's not just because the Erdogan is a crazy guy, or it's because this current, let's say, government in Turkey is very ambitious. No, it's very basic and easy understanding, which gives Turks and Turkish leadership to deal with South Caucasus, as any other leadership will do in this kind of situation.
I see. We see a lot of pushback when we talk about how in this region the traditional three main players are Russia, Turkey, and Iran. they're talking about this great new extra-regional, extraterritorial powers. What can be said about the two different approaches, the more like localist one and the global one? What constitutes, like, what are the reason? What's the reasoning behind each of these views?
Well, as I said, this is an important region, and this is important region for any player in Eurasia. That's why it's not surprising for any, let's say, foreign uh, expert or scholar who deals with South Caucasus to see how interested in this region are so many diverse players, from China up to European Union. And why sometimes, by the way, the conflicts which happen here are considered much seriously than any other this type of or this scale of conflict in any part of the world. I would like to remind that the 2020 war, the 44 days war, so-called, when Azerbaijan attacked the Republic of Artsakh and the Republic of Armenia, widely is considered as one of the scholars put it, as a world war of local importance. So it was a war which was not dealing just with the Armenians and Azerbaijanis. No, it was about larger geopolitical competition in Eurasia. So it's impossible to look at the events and developments here in the region without the larger context of Eurasian politics. And not surprisingly, what happens in South Caucasus has direct or indirect influence on the Ukrainian front, for example. It has an influence on Middle Eastern front. It's very easy for any viewer to look into the events of the region and to understand that there is a certain connection between Iranian problem or Iranian crisis and South Caucasian, let's say, problems. Of course, there is a direct link. What happened in Syria, development in Gaza, they have an influence over here because all the actors which are part of the issues and the conflicts and developments back there in Middle East, they are the same players here in this region as well. So for them, it's not that what happens here is not a separate process. It's one, let's say, level of the big chain of processes happening in wider Eurasian platform.
You mentioned Syria, and we saw that Turkey was able to advance their interest there quite a lot.
Correct.
How come this great, as the term that was coined was the crossroads, like, of peace again, this border security region like this that was decided on? What was it called? In 2019, they decided on a buffer zone that was again called like this crossroad of peace. Why did all of these plans fall through? Why didn't they work? And what does it mean? Like, what consequences do we have as a result of what occurred in Syria?
Well, let me put larger. To understand what happens in Great Middle East, there are two main approaches which are dominant in political thinking from US to China. The first one we can roughly call the approach of realism, which comes from the theory of realism in international relations, a very well developed theory. And the second one is, again, a theory which comes, again, from philosophical thought of Western world, the liberalism. The first one look at the events which are happening in international politics as constant conflict, which is not because of the regimes, ideologies, etc., but because it looks at the international events as always a need for any country to make a balance of power. So the power is the currency of international relations, in other words. So if you want to survive, the only thing you need to do is to be stronger and stronger again. In liberalism, there are many waves in this big, let's say, liberal thinking. The main approach is that it is possible to change the human nature, so that states at some point, because of their being democracies, because of having liberal economic systems, market economies, etc., they at some point will come to a situation when to have a peace will be more beneficially than to have war. Unfortunately, many people, especially in Armenian world, are I don't know why, or maybe I know why. They are fans of liberal approach to international relations. So they don't want to believe, in other words, that the conflict with Turkey, the problems with any other regional power, is not because of, let's say, some small mistakes or big mistakes, but it's just the very nature of relations that can happen in this territory. Especially in Middle East, it's very strange to talk about constant peace and to talk about the possibility of not, supporting your peace by power. Uh, I was in Syria just a couple of months ago, before the Assad, the legal government fall, and I was asking my Arab friends, what do you think about peace and other stuff? What I was getting as an answer was something like this. I mean, are you crazy? You are talking about peace by paper and not talking about peace by weapon? So it's very strange for anybody living in Middle East. So that's why sometimes I mean this let's say outdated liberalism in this sense, it influences the approach of many people who are really willing to make like better life here and better relations, but it has nothing to do with reality. So realist approach gives us all answers, and thanks to the realist approach we can easily see why for example the peace approaches and initiatives decades ago and now they failed and they're gonna fail. The only way to stop Turkish ambitions is the power. If you are willing to fight and you are ready to fight, even if you are smaller, it makes them to, let's say, rethink the approach, to rethink the possibility of attacking and taking control over, which happened, by the way, with Syria. Syria initially opened all the borders, uh, stated that, I'm talking about the beginning of 2000s. President Bashar Assad said that, okay, now the outdated conflict should be part of history and we should talk about peace and prosperity. And they made all the concessions that Turks asked back then for peace. What happened? Let me bring an example from Syrian Turkish conflict so that it will be much easier for our audience to understand. Um, as you know, Turkey and Syria were in conflict for many decades. In 2000s, when the peace process started, Turkey asked Bashar, suggested actually, President Assad to take all the minefields from the Syrian-Turkish border because it was very well protected. Uh, and Syrian side said, okay, we'll take all the mines. Um, Turkey didn't. So Syrian side said, as we are not going to have any conflict anymore and we are going to have good trade relations, which actually started, they said there is no need for mines and there is no need for any protection of the border. What Turkey did when they got an opportunity to attack Assad, they used the very same routes, which are now out of any mines, to attack and very easily cross the border and go deep into the territory of Syria and finally to conquer it. And I can bring tens of these type of examples from Turkish-Syrian conflict, because if you are not really taking the power as the currency of relations, but you are taking the goodwill, then you are going to fail. So that's why Turkish-Syrian reconciliation failed. And as you can see, in just like couple of weeks, when again the Syrian government believed in peace and the fact that Turkey is ready to go for peace, they failed. But when they decided in 2011 to fight, they managed to stop Turks, and it made Turks to go for negotiations. So this is the only way which it works, and it is fully applicable for the case of Armenia.
The most traditional conflict, I think, in this region is that those who have power over the lands in Anatolia go into conflict with those who are in control of Persian lands. What are the prospects of there being conflict, of there being, competition, and can Armenia make use of the Iranian-Turkish tensions?
Well, again, South Caucasus and what is surrounding it, it was always and still is the subject of geopolitical competition. It was always like that. The states which happened to be on both sides of this region, which was once called Armenian Highland, were always fighting for influence here. Just look at the history and you'll find like tons of examples. Again, from Arab Caliphate up to Ottoman Empire, it was always about that. And Iran and Ottoman Empire, they started their, let's say, very cruel and very intensive competition for this region. At least the last phase started in 16th century, so they were fighting for influence here. From the Armenian history, by the way, we know that Armenia was one of the main battlefields of that competition. It was not for Armenia and not about Armenia. It was about imperial competition to have influence over this region. So currently, by the way, we are witnessing the most updated version of this competition. As we know, Turkey on one side, or Ottoman Empire, and Iranian state, or currently the Islamic Republic of Iran, they are still having the same problems and the same interests. Because the one who controls, as we said in the beginning, the one who controls South Caucasus, it controls everything else which is surrounding. So nothing changed in that. And the only thing which can be different from the 16th century is that there is another player here, Russia. Back then, Russian Empire, which joined this competition, and now it is again about these three countries. Look at the official format of negotiations between these three countries: Russia, Iran, Turkey. What they are discussing is mostly about South Caucasus. There is nothing else, because it's the connecting point, as well as at the same time it's the separating, diversing point for these all three empires or great states or great powers or whatever we call it. So that's why Iran and Ottoman Empire, Iran and Turkey nowadays, they're always going to be on different sides in this competition. But this doesn't mean that there could be periods when, because they want to, for example, they see that there is another power, in this case Russia, is becoming much stronger in South Caucasus, so they can work together to, in a way, push back that influence. But currently we see that the situation is vice versa. Turkey is advancing in South Caucasus, so we see cooperation between, on one side, Iran and Russia on the other side, to push back the Turkish influence. So it's always about this game. The only thing that Armenia can do is, first of all, be aware what's happening. It's not about Armenian interests. It's not about love or hate towards Armenians. No, it's a very basic realist politics. And if you know the game, first of all, you understand the rules of the game. You know how to play that. Otherwise, you are becoming the victim of what happens, and you start to find the one whom you should blame, which is not correct. And here I would like to bring a very famous joke from international relations, which I usually share with my students, is that it says that if you are invited for a dinner, and you enter to the room and you don't see any chair for you around the table, it means you are the part of menu. So you are the subject of the discussion for those who are sitting around the table. Unfortunately, we not really understanding the region, not really understanding the atmosphere, the environment we live in, usually makes us to be the subjects on the table and to be parts of menu, not to be the one who sits around the table, even if the chair that you have is smaller than the others. But still, you are around the table, not on the table.
Mm-hmm. The current authorities seem to have the idea of making Armenia develop in the sort of Georgian model, where there is a lot of Turkish influence, Azerbaijani influence, but this is done under the umbrella, the packaging of moving towards the West. Why is it possible for us to just have some more Turkish influence, or is it impossible, or is it an existential? Is the Armenian political factor unique in this sense?
There are three things we should mention here. First, I'm not sure that the Georgian model is the best model to try to repeat. And we can say that Georgia lost a lot because of its geopolitical, let's say, some drives into West and then back. So that's why it is important to look in details and not the things that are being represented in Western press. Second thing is that is there really a desire on the other side, on Turkish side, to have developed Armenia here in the region? The short answer is no. The long answer is no, no, and no again. If we look at the rhetorics of Turkey and Azerbaijan, I mean, they are not even trying to somehow, delicately tune their wording. No, they are saying directly that Armenia as a state shouldn't be here in the region. These are the words of President Aliyev of Azerbaijan. They are saying that what currently states as Armenian Republic, it is part of historical Turkey or Azerbaijan or Western Azerbaijan, something like that. So I mean, you don't really have that type of desire on the other side. So what kind of relations you imagine, what kind of peaceful relations you imagine without really, again, using the currency that I described, the currency of power. So really opposing what they are doing, not by just on the paper, but really showing that you are ready to fight, even if it's taking all of your resources. But still, it's making the price of war and conflict for the other side higher. So you don't see any Turkish and Azerbaijani sincere wish to have coexistence with Armenia as being promoted by the de facto government of Armenia currently, unfortunately. And the third thing is that West, or the thing that we imagine under the word West, so the European Union or NATO, they don't really have direct interests here in the region, so they don't really have resources and any plans to be presented here in this region by their central power or by engaging Armenia to be part of NATO or European Union. Look at Georgia, the Georgian case. Look at Moldova, Ukraine, Turkey even is not part of European Union. So it's very, very, very difficult to imagine that at any day Armenia is going to be a European Union country. Even if we, let's say, color all the buildings in Armenia with European Union flags, it doesn't make us to be part of European Union. I remember that I was traveling to Georgia permanently starting from the second half of 2000s, and what I was really in a way, let's say, the surprising thing for me while I was visiting Georgia was that everywhere I was seeing European Union and US flags. I mean, it's very strange that you are putting your sovereignty so, let's say, under the being part of any union or any let's say any country which at on its side never says that you are going to be part of it. So European Union never said that Georgia is going to be part of it. Never. I mean, it's very, very easy and very obvious. So now we see that type of approach in Armenia, unfortunately, which has no profound difference from Georgian case. And European Union representatives, they never say that Armenia is going to be part of that. NATO is never going to take Armenia as part of it. Again, here we can look at the Ukrainian case. Ukraine is part of NATO? No. Ukraine did everything to be part of NATO. No, it's not going to be. And the last thing, for Western, let's say, world, they already have representation here with Turkey, because Turkey is part of NATO. It's the only NATO member country in the region, and it still goes to be like that in the upcoming decades. So, I mean, if Turkey has an opportunity to be the most influential power in South Caucasus, pushing out Russia and Iran from here, so no need for any, let's say, further representation here. Turkey can be the agent of that, let's say, Western world here, which Turkey is ready to do, because it, in a way, goes in parallel with its own interests to be influential here. So that's why I don't see this approach, which currently is in a way part of official politics of the Republic of Armenia, as fruitful, and moreover, it never going to, let's say, somehow fulfill the concerns that we have, security concerns first of all. So no NATO soldier and no EU member country soldier is going to protect us from Turkish attack, especially given the fact that NATO and Turkey are the same.
We know that the Kurdish factor is often used against to contain Turkey. Can't Armenia become yet another even though it's a state and not, like Kurds, they're not really have statehood yet. But can it become another factor of containing Turkish power in the region?
Who should contain? That's the question. I mean, who should contain Turkey? Who will to contain? There are two countries in the region which are not interested in having NATO member Turkey's influence on South Caucasus and in the region in general more than it has right now. These are very basically Iran and Russia. Whether they have an opportunity and resources to contain Turkish, that's another question. And sometimes we see that there is a possibility on some questions. Yes, red lines are far away than we can consider. In some situations, we have even cooperation between these sides, but still the competition goes over. And very naturally, nor Iran, neither Russia are interested in having more stronger Turkey in South Caucasus. So very basically, for us, these are the natural allies. I'm not saying that these are the most beautiful allies. I'm not saying that these are the desired allies for any country, but these are natural allies, which means that our own interest to, let's say, stop and oppose Turkish influence coincides with the Russian and Iranian interest not to let Turkey be active and more influential here in this region, which could be on the stakes of them. So that's why, again, from the perspective of realism, for Armenia, Iran and Russia should be priority. If these countries are not at that moment ready to do that, you should lobby for that. You should work in that direction. You should constantly work and never ignore their presence. Because otherwise, instead of one country which is openly against you in this region, one regional country, you will have three regional countries against you. And that's the clear road to, let's say, full failure.
Turkey wants to, many call it, recreate the Ottoman Empire. It has neo-Ottoman ambitions, but how is it going to reconcile this idea of like one nation, one religion with the ideas which were, I guess, more traditional in the Middle East of having an empire where difference is accepted and difference is okay?
Currently, Turkey officially never says that we are rebuilding the Ottoman Empire. But what they do is to create the zones of influence. This is another term we use in geopolitics, in international relations, which means that you have political, military, economic, cultural, or altogether influence over the regions which are beyond your official borders. So it's very naturally South Caucasus, Syria, Iraq, so Middle East, or let's say conventional Middle East, Balkan countries, the south of Russia, Central Asia are natural zones of influence of Turkey. And Turkish foreign policy, especially during the era of Erdogan, having resources enough to do that, tries to create that zones of influence. In some places just cultural influence, in some places cultural plus economic In some places, political influence, like we have the case in Balkans, we have the case in Caucasus, in Ukraine. In some cases, it is also the military influence, like we have in Iraq or in Syria or in Libya. So Turkey is in constant pursuit of this creation of zones of influence I mentioned. And in some cases, this is fully coincides with the territory of former Ottoman Empire. In some cases, not, because South Caucasus was never part of Ottoman Empire. Well, it was just for a couple of decades, and that's it. Or Central Asia was never part of Ottoman Empire, but still Turkey has ambitions there. So that's why using the term neo-Ottomanism, sometimes it is a very useful thing, but sometimes it never explains the real, let's say, content of the Turkish foreign policy. So how they are going to, let's say, manage the territories which are under their indirect or direct control, there are several approaches, and each approach is precisely, let's say, being selected and used for that specific region. In case of Syria, they conquered northern parts of Syria. Officially, I mean, they are part of, right now they're under control of Turkish armed forces. And what they did there was a thing that is quite familiar for us. They did demographic engineering, which in 1915 was in form of genocide. In 2000, when Turkey did that, in 2000, starting from 2016, it's taking out Kurds from that region, Armenians from that region, forcing them, deporting them, and instead of them bringing the Turkic-speaking Turkoman tribes to the regions which are right now under their control, or making to the Sunni Muslims who are loyal to Turkey to come and to live instead of Kurds and Armenians and Arabs and Christian Arabs, etc., in this region. So it's basically the same target, the same aim, but just the tools are different. So this is one approach. Another approach is to make a propaganda so that the people who are targets of these zones of influence become, let's say, more loyal to Turkey and willingly, let's say, inclined towards Turkey. This is the case with some countries in Central Asia, like in Kazakhstan, in Turkmenistan, in Uzbekistan. Unfortunately, Turkey is very successful in making the people living there, Turkic-speaking people, who are not Turks, but they are Turkic-speaking, Uzbeks, Kazakhs, etc., to be inclined towards Turkey. And of course, this is, let's say, in their further plans, this is going to be the ground for further cultural, economic, and of course, military presence. So, I mean, there are different approaches, and Turkish diplomacy and Turkish, in general, state is very persistent in what they are doing. I mean, they're working with possible, taking into account the possible limitations. So, I mean, if at that very moment, the ultimate goal, which is to have full influence in these regions, is not reachable, then let's say, what I call the using the art of small steps. Just do one step more. Then, in 10 days, in 10 years, or in 100 years, you will have an opportunity, and you will use that opportunity again, because you have already one step more forward.
One final question. Okay. These are pretty dark times for Armenia, and a lot of people are pessimistic about its future. Where do you find the strength to continue? What's it like teaching in a country that many people say is occupied?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, let me say three things, okay? The first thing is that usually the Turkish propaganda, and sometimes some Armenians are voicing to this, adding their voice to this propaganda, tells us the story that everything has finished and no need to fight, no need to struggle, no need to oppose. Just do what Turks tell us to do, and we live in some way in peace. Which is not true, not only because we will not live in peace. Look at Syrians, or look at Cyprus people, or look at Kurds living in Turkey. But also it is not true because if the situation is already, let's say, beyond change, so that we don't have really resources to oppose the Turkish possible attack, Azerbaijani attack, etc., Turkey and Azerbaijan will never put this much effort into making this propaganda live among Armenians, as well as making so much pressure on Armenian side, on diplomatic, military, and all the other fields. So the situation is just the opposite. From after 2020, after the war, after their victory in the war, what they did was not to reduce the pressure on Armenia, but vice versa, to make more pressure on us. Which means that still they see resources. Compared to Armenians, Turks are, let's say, very good specialists in Armenian studies. They know Armenia, they know the possibilities of Armenia, they know the possibilities of the region and the possible changes that can happen in case Armenia's government decides to counter Turkish influence here. So this is the first thing. Second thing, which derives from here, if I know that there is still a chance to fight, what I'm doing is to fight. And who says that it is going to be easy to have a state here in this region? No, nobody says. Especially for us specialists, we know the specifics of the region, which means us to be, let's say, more prepared for difficult times. And we know that the only way to oppose and the only way to have a right to live here is to fight and to be ready to fight. So this is the second thing which makes my fight, which is first of all in the classroom and in other possible places, to use the knowledge that I have to show the reality. And then hopefully those who are listening, those who are part of my audience, adults or children, no matter who, or students, they will take appropriate steps in whatever field they are going to be engaged. And the third thing is that this can be a little bit, let's say, philosophical approach, but I think that I am in a way should be thankful to God, and that still I have a state, I have a country, homeland to live in, and I take this proudly, because if I and my generation have a possibility to fight for the homeland, which is currently we are trying to do, it means that still I have a homeland, and it's a pride for me. And it depends on me and my generation and my friends and my fellow Armenians whether I'm going to be successful in this or I'm gonna fail. Both are going to be mine, success and failure. So just to sit and do nothing is not for me, because I want to have the homeland back. I want to have the state strong back, and I'm doing that.
Thank you so much for such an insightful conversation.
Thank you.
So see you next time, Hayrenik. Today we had a conversation with Varuzhan Geghamyan, who's an associate professor of Turkish studies at Yerevan State University.